You have been given an instruction. You may have received it from a mentor, from a book, from a video you watched at 2 in the morning after something broke you. Maybe a betrayal, maybe a humiliation, maybe just a slow accumulation of caring too much about people who cared too little. And in that state, the advice landed because it named something real. You had been hurt by caring. The instruction goes like this: stop caring what people think. Care less. Become emotionless. Get cold. Get strategic. Stop being so available, so reactive, so easy to wound. The ones who control the room are the ones who feel nothing. And here is the truth. That instruction is half right. The diagnosis was correct. The people giving you this advice were reporting honestly on something they had discovered. Caring as you were doing it was costing you. That part is true. But the prescription is wrong. And because it is only half right, because it contains a real insight wrapped inside a fundamentally wrong framing, it has led many people somewhere they did not intend to go. Not to power, to numbness. Not to freedom, to isolation. Not to precision, to a different kind of distortion. I have watched people take this instruction seriously and arrive 6 months later as smaller, harder, less interesting versions of themselves. They became unreachable, and they mistook unreachable for free. What I want to do in this video is give you the other half of the instruction, the half that turns a blunt, imprecise tool into a surgical one, the half that the cold and strategic content never quite reaches, not because it is hidden, but because reaching it requires a different premise about what emotion actually is. The people of Kemet had a word for it. They called it Maʔat. And Maʔat is not stop caring. Maʔat is care exactly right. That you care too much. What are they actually observing? Let's be precise about this. They are observing that your emotional response to a situation is disproportionate to what that situation actually warrants. Let me give you the concrete shape of this. You spend 2 hours devastated by a comment from someone whose opinion has no bearing on your life. You lie awake at 3 a.m. analyzing the look on someone's face from a meeting that ended 6 hours ago. A look that may have meant nothing, that may have been hunger, that may have been them remembering something else entirely. You restructure your behavior for days around a reaction you imagined from someone who probably hasn't thought about you since. You read a message 4 times, hearing a different tone in it each time, none of which were the tone that was actually intended. This is not caring too much. This is miscalibrated caring. You are spending emotional currency, and emotional currency is finite. It costs you real metabolic energy, real attention, real hours of your life, on investments that have no real value. And while you are spending it there, the things that do have value, the conversation with someone who matters, the project that actually moves your life forward, the relationship that quietly needs your attention, are getting nothing. You are not over-caring. You are caring in the wrong places, and you are exhausting the instrument in the process. The issue is not the caring itself. The issue is the calibration. A master investor does not stop investing because they made bad investments. They study the losses. They identify what made each one a loss. Was it timing? Was it the underlying thesis? Was it emotional? Was it information they didn't have? They recalibrate their model. They invest more precisely. This is the Maʿat approach. Not fewer emotions, more accurate ones. And the work of accuracy, this needs to be said clearly, is harder than the work of indifference. Indifference can be performed. Calibration must actually be learned. Return with me to the hall of two truths, the ceremony of the weighing of the heart. In ancient Kemetic belief, this was what happened to a soul at death. You stood before a court of 42 divine judges. You named your alignments and your transgressions. And then came the weighing. Anubis, the god of the dead, places the soul's heart on one plate of the scale. On the other plate, the feather of Maʿat. Maʿat herself was the goddess of truth, of balance, of cosmic order. She was depicted as a woman wearing a single ostrich feather in her hair. That feather is what the heart was measured against. What is being measured is not whether the person was obedient, or successful, or admired. What is being measured is whether the heart is carrying its right weight. If the heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by what it should not have carried, by stored regret, by hoarded fear, by attachments that had ossified into burdens, it would tip the scale. And what stood behind the scale was Amit, the devourer, the hybrid creature with the head of a crocodile, the front of a lion, the back of a hippopotamus, the end of the line for the heart that could not balance. Now, here is the part most modern retellings miss. The heart that cared about nothing, that felt nothing, registered nothing, committed to nothing, is not a light heart. It is a collapsed heart. A heart that has given up the work of accurate measurement. And that heart would also fail the scale, because a broken instrument is not a calibrated one. The empty plate does not balance against the feather either. It just sits there, registering nothing. What Maʿat is testing for is precision. Did this heart respond to what was actually there? Did it grieve what was genuinely worth grieving? Did it love what was genuinely worth loving? Did it remain unshaken by what was genuinely without consequence? Did it commit where commitment was earned and withhold where commitment was not earned? The heart that passes the scale is not cold, it is exact. It is the heart that has learned to weigh each moment against reality, against what is actually there, rather than against its own fears and desires. This is the deepest version of the practice we have inherited from the ancient world. Not transcend emotion, not rise above feeling. Measure truly. Respond accurately. Carry only what is yours to carry. The feather did not ask the heart to be empty. The feather asked the heart to be honest. In signal processing, there is a phenomenon called stochastic resonance. It sounds technical. It is actually beautiful. When a noisy signal is added to a weak but true signal, sometimes, counterintuitively, the noise actually helps the weak signal become detectable. The activation pushes the underlying truth above the detection threshold. This is a real, measurable effect. It is how some sensors work. It is how some neurons work. But there is a threshold. Past that threshold, The noise overwhelms the true signal completely. You can no longer detect what is real. The noise is no longer helping you sense the underlying pattern. The noise is the signal you are responding to. Your emotional responses work exactly the same way. Some emotional activation helps you perceive reality more clearly. You are slightly alarmed. Your attention sharpens. You notice detail you would have missed in a state of complete calm. The mild alarm is not a malfunction. It is the instrument doing its job. You are slightly moved by a conversation. You remember it more clearly. The detail it contained becomes accessible to you later in a way it would not have if you had registered it neutrally. But past a certain threshold, when the emotional noise becomes too high, you lose the signal entirely. Fear that becomes panic no longer tells you where the danger is. It generates danger everywhere. It floods the perceptual field until every shadow is a threat. Grief that becomes consuming depression no longer tells you what was valuable. It flattens everything into one texture of pain. The thing you lost and the things you still have begin to feel the same. Anger past a threshold no longer tells you where the injustice is. It makes everything feel like an attack. It conscripts neutral events into a story of being wronged. Notice what is happening in each of these cases. The emotion was originally information. It became, past the threshold, a generator of misinformation. This is why emotional calibration is not about dampening emotion. It is about keeping the signal clean. You want enough activation to perceive accurately, not so much that the noise takes over. And here is the second important point. There is no universal threshold. Every instrument has its own range. Your nervous system has been calibrated by every experience you have ever had, every adaptation it had to make, every shock it has absorbed. What is appropriate activation for one person is overwhelm for another and underwhelm for a third. The work is not to match someone else's calibration. The work is to understand your own instrument well enough to know when it is in its useful range and when it has tipped into noise. Most people, most of the time, are operating in full noise. Not because they feel too much, because they have never learned to calibrate the instrument. They have never been taught that calibration is even a thing you can learn. What does a calibrated emotional response actually look like? Let me give you 3 concrete shapes of it. Scenario 1. Someone says something designed to provoke you. An uncalibrated response, immediate spike, defensive reaction, counterattack, or withdrawal, neither of which actually addresses what happened. A calibrated response, a brief, honest internal measurement. Does this observation contain anything true that I should register? If yes, register it, extract the information, respond to the truth in it. Even if the speaker meant it as an attack, if it contained a piece of accurate observation about you, that piece is now yours to use. If no, the response is not a performance of indifference. It is simply accurate measurement. The thing that was designed to hurt you had no real weight. The scale confirmed this. No performance is required. No shutdown is required. You simply noted what the instrument said. Scenario 2. A partner or close friend is upset with you about something. The uncalibrated response is one of 2 extremes. Either total emotional collapse, I have failed, they will leave, I am bad, or total dismissal, they are being irrational, I don't have to engage with this. The calibrated response asks, what is actually being communicated here? What is the real complaint underneath the wording? Is there something I have done, even small, even unintentional, that I need to take seriously? You are not weighing whether to be hurt. You are weighing what is true. Scenario 3. You receive feedback at work that stings. The uncalibrated response is rumination, replay, the constant return to the sentence that landed wrong. The calibrated response is to take the feedback, separate the signal from the delivery, and ask, is this person reporting something I should adjust, or are they reporting something about themselves? Sometimes both, sometimes neither. The work is the measurement. Now here is where the feathercore practice diverges sharply from the become cold school. The cold approach says, do not react as a rule. Build a wall and let nothing penetrate it. The feathercore says, measure accurately, every time. Sometimes accurate measurement means a strong response, strong grief, strong protest, strong delight. Sometimes it means no response at all. But it is always determined by what the measurement actually says, not by a predecided posture of indifference. A predecided posture of indifference is still a reaction. It is just a reaction to the fear of feeling rather than a reaction to the feeling itself. True calibration is not afraid of any result. It is willing to feel a great deal when a great deal is warranted, and willing to feel almost nothing when almost nothing is warranted. It does not predecide. It measures. There is a mechanism that fires in the human mind between perception and emotional response. It happens fast, faster than awareness, fast enough that you experience the result of it as if it were the original event. The stimulus arrives, someone's tone of voice, a text message that hasn't been replied to, a look that could mean 10 different things, a silence where you expected an answer. And before you have consciously processed the stimulus, a story about it has already been generated. That story is not neutral. It is shaped by every previous experience that felt like this one. It is shaped by what you fear this might mean. It is shaped by what you hope this might mean. And in most cases, that story is significantly more extreme than reality. The tone of voice probably had nothing to do with you. The person was tired. They were thinking about something else. They were in pain you didn't know about. The unreturned text has 6 possible explanations, 5 of which are mundane. They are busy. They saw it and forgot. They are composing a longer reply. Their phone died. They are bad at responding. The look meant nothing, or it meant something, but not what you assumed. But by the time the story has been generated, in the fraction of a second before you have conscious awareness of it, the emotional response to the story has already begun. You are not responding to the stimulus. You are responding to the story your nervous system told about the stimulus. This is the root of miscalibrated caring. The feathercore practice is interrupt the story, not suppress the emotion, not perform indifference. Interrupt the automatic generation of the story long enough to ask one question. What actually happened? What does the raw measurement say before interpretation? This is a small practice. You can do it in 3 seconds. You do not need a meditation cushion or a journal. You just need to catch the story in the act of being told and ask, briefly, whether the evidence supports it. Done once, this is a useful exercise. Done 1,000 times, over weeks, over months, it recalibrates the instrument. The stories become less extreme. The default emotional responses become more proportional. The space between stimulus and reaction widens, and in that widening, accurate measurement becomes possible. Not colder, more accurate. Let me draw the distinction clearly, because this is the hinge point of everything in this video. Emotional minimalism says, feel as little as possible. Reduce your exposure. Eliminate attachment. Disengage from anything that could become a source of pain. This is the Stoic Machiavellian hybrid that most of the Become Untouchable content is pointing toward. It is also a partial reading of actual Stoicism. The original Stoics were not advocating numbness, they were advocating accurate response. But the popular translation has flattened them into something colder than they were. And there is real value in minimalism at a certain stage of development. If your instrument is so overwhelmed by noise that it cannot function at all, minimalism is the right first step. Turn down the input. Create space to breathe. Stop bleeding emotional currency into channels that have no return. This is necessary triage. If you are drowning, the first thing is to stop taking on water. We can talk about how to swim properly once you are not actively going under. But minimalism is not the destination. It is the recovery room. It is not the gymnasium. People who get stuck in the minimalism phase look powerful from the outside, for a while. They are no longer reactive. They are no longer manipulable. They are no longer easy to wound. But they have also stopped growing, because growth requires accurate response to feedback. And accurate response requires the instrument to be working, not just turned down. Emotional precision says, feel exactly what is true, not less than what is true. That is suppression. And suppressed measurements do not disappear, they distort. They emerge later as fatigue, as cynicism, as misplaced reactions to small things. Not more than what is true, that is amplification. And amplified noise destroys the signal. Exactly what is true. This requires a more advanced skill than minimalism. Minimalism is a blunt instrument. It reduces everything. Precision is a surgical one. It leaves the true things intact and removes only the false additions. The person operating from emotional precision still grieves genuinely when something real has been lost, still loves genuinely when something is worth loving, still feels anger when something genuinely unjust has occurred, and feels it accurately enough to act on it well, not in a way that creates new harm. But they do not grieve what was not worth grieving, do not love what has not earned love, do not feel anger at what was not actually an injustice, at what was merely an inconvenience, or someone else's bad day, or a story the mind told about events that did not contain the meaning assigned to them. This is the Maʿat trained heart. This is what passes the scale. And it is, and this matters, not the destination of the cold and strategic path. That path leads at best to durable minimalism. This path leads further. There is a well-established principle in both physics and communication theory. In any environment with competing signals, the clearest, most stable signal is the one that dominates. Not the loudest, the clearest. A radio station with low wattage but no distortion will reach further than a powerful station broadcasting through noise. A clear whisper in a quiet room reaches every ear. A shout in a stadium reaches no one. When people talk about presence, about the person in the room whose energy everyone feels without that person having to say anything, they are sensing a clear signal, not a loud one, not a performed one, a calibrated one. You have felt this. Think about a time when someone walked into a tense room and the tension dropped without them saying a word. They were not performing calm, they were broadcasting calm because they actually had it. The signal was clean. The uncalibrated person in the room is generating noise, anxiety that expresses itself as over-talking, humor that reaches too hard, opinions stated with more force than confidence, laughter that lands a fraction of a second early or late, praise offered for reasons other than the actual quality of what is being praised. The miscalibrated person is generating interference. Their emotional responses are running at frequencies that are off from reality, and other people's nervous systems detect this mismatch, even when they cannot consciously name it. You have felt this too. Think about the person who seemed sincere, but you couldn't quite trust. The compliment that felt strange, even though it was technically nice. The cheerfulness that felt like a performance. You were detecting a calibration error. The Maʿat calibrated person is generating a clean signal. Their emotional temperature is appropriate to the situation. Their silences are not absence, they are accurate measurement in progress. Their responses, when they come, land with weight because they are not diluted by noise. When they say yes, it means yes. When they say no, it means no. When they laugh, the laughter matches the moment. When they are quiet, the quiet is real. This is not coldness, it is clarity. And in a world of noise, in a social landscape dominated by performance, reaction, and amplified feeling, a clean, calibrated signal stands out the way a lighthouse stands out in fog. Not by being brighter than the sun, by being exactly where it needs to be. By being the same thing it was yesterday. By being honest at the frequency at which the world is full of dishonesty. This is the unspoken authority of the Maʿat trained. It does not announce itself. It does not need to. Now, let's talk about the mechanics of what happens when you become genuinely calibrated. Not performing indifference, not pretending you do not care to protect yourself, but genuinely, through the practice of accurate measurement, arriving at a state where many of the things that used to disturb you no longer do. Not because you have decided not to care, because you have measured them and found them not worth the wait. What happens in your relationships and social environment when this shift occurs? Several things, and they are not all comfortable. First, people who were relying on your miscalibration as leverage lose their leverage. If someone has been influencing your behavior by triggering your anxiety, your approval seeking, your fear of being abandoned, and suddenly those triggers no longer fire reliably, they will notice, often before you notice it yourself. The shift will register in the relationship as a kind of static. Something is different. The old buttons aren't producing the old responses. They will often escalate, trying to locate the trigger that still works. This is uncomfortable. It can look, from the inside, like the relationship is suddenly in crisis. It is not. The crisis was always there. It was being managed by your willingness to be moved by their pressure. When that willingness adjusts, the management strategy fails and the underlying truth of the relationship becomes visible. When they cannot find a trigger, not because you have sealed yourself away, but because accurate measurement has found their levers unworthy of weight, they either recalibrate to you or they leave. Both outcomes serve you. The ones who recalibrate are showing you that the relationship can be honest. The ones who leave are showing you that it never was. Second, people who are themselves calibrated, who have done their own Maʿat work, will be drawn toward you, because you are speaking a language they recognize, the language of honest measurement, the language of yes means yes, no means no, silence means silence, and not performance. Clean signal seeking clean signal. This is a real phenomenon. The calibrated find each other, not because they are looking for each other, but because they are easy to recognize once you know what you are looking at. Third, you will make better decisions. Because your decisions will be based on what is actually there rather than on the stories your nervous system generated about what is there. You will leave the job that should be left. You will stay in the conversation that should be stayed in. You will say the difficult truth that needs to be said. You will withhold the unnecessary word that did not need to be spoken. Each of these is a small calibration. Over years, they compound. This is the practical payoff of emotional calibration. Not dominance, not coldness. Better information, better decisions, better outcomes. A life that is shaped more by what is real and less by what your fears insisted was real. I want to end with the most important calibration of all. The one that most content in this space never addresses. The calibration of self-perception. Most people are not primarily miscalibrated about other people. They are primarily miscalibrated about themselves. There are three classic distortions. The first is inflation. The internal voice that tells you that you are more capable than you are, that your work is better than it is, that your character is more reliable than it has shown itself to be, that you are owed something the evidence does not actually support. Inflation protects the ego from honest measurement. It feels good in the moment. Over time, it is catastrophic. It leads you to attempt things you are not yet ready for, to refuse feedback that would make you ready, and to be repeatedly surprised when the world reflects back a smaller version of you than the one you are carrying. The second is deflation, the internal voice that tells you that you are less capable than you are, that your work is not good enough, that your judgment cannot be trusted, that you are an imposter, that you do not deserve, that you should not try. Deflation also protects the ego, but from a different risk. From the risk of trying and failing publicly. From the risk of being seen attempting something and being found insufficient. Both distortions are forms of cowardice dressed as confidence or as modesty. The third is fixation, a less obvious distortion and possibly the most stubborn. Fixation is when you are still carrying the self-perception of a version of yourself that no longer exists. The strong one in the family, who has actually been quietly falling apart for 2 years. The good one, who has not had to look honestly at what they have become. The logical one, whose logic has been masking unprocessed grief. The broken one, who has in fact healed considerably, but is still operating from the wound's original assumptions. The identity you have constructed, and identities are always constructions, always selective edits of the actual material, is a story. And like all stories, it is a mix of true measurement and false addition. The deepest Maʿat practice is to weigh the self with the same precision you apply to everything else. Not harshly. Harshness is not precision, it is another distortion, and it tends to be deflation with a stricter accent. Not generously. Generosity toward false self-perception is not kindness. It is a miscalibration that compounds over time. accurately. What do you actually know? Not what you wish you knew. Not what you fear you don't know. What have you actually demonstrated in evidence in your own life? What have you actually built, begun, finished, sustained? What is genuinely true about who you are right now? Not who you were 5 years ago, not who you fear you might be, not who you are performing, but who you actually are in your current functioning. Carry that, only that. Let the rest fall. This is not easy. The false additions feel like they are part of you because you have been carrying them for a long time. Releasing them feels, at first, like loss. It is not loss. It is precision. And in time, precision will give you back something the inflated and deflated and fixated self could never have. Stability that does not need anyone else's confirmation. Because when your self-perception is accurate, what people say about you stops being able to move you in either direction. You don't need their praise. The instrument has already measured. You don't need to defend against their criticism. The instrument has already measured. This is the weighing of the heart. This is Maʿat. And this is the foundation of every form of real power worth having. The popular instruction is stop caring. The feather core instruction is care precisely. The difference between those two things is the difference between breaking an instrument and calibrating it. You are not too sensitive. You are not too cold. You are, most likely, running an uncalibrated instrument in a world that has never taught you how to calibrate it. A world that has, in fact, profited from your miscalibration, that has used your anxious caring as a lever for selling, persuading, controlling, distracting. The way of the feather is the calibration process. It is not fast. It is not dramatic. It will not give you a single transformation moment that you can post about and have people congratulate you on. It is the daily practice of weighing what is real against what the noise says is real. Small measurements, honest measurements, repeated. And over time, in the accumulation of accurate measurements, the signal becomes clear. And a clear signal cannot be manipulated, because manipulation works only where the instrument is already giving false readings, where the story is already louder than the stimulus, where the heart is already carrying things it should not be carrying. When you have done the work of weighing, when your heart carries only what is genuinely its own to carry, there is no leverage available to anyone who would try to move you with noise. Your calibration is your protection. Your precision is your power. The feather is not light because it is empty. The feather is light because it carries exactly what it is meant to carry, and nothing else. The feather is exact.